to reason. Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah. Gotta get away from this illusion. For the sake of the world, this delusion. It's gotta
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of the Atheist Experience. I am your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is Jeff D.
Hi, Russell. I'm glad to hear this is going to be one of the awesome ones.
Yeah, not one of those lame ones that we're always having when we're not on. Today is Sunday, September 25th, 2011. We're a live call-in public access show, atheist television show based in Austin, Texas, dedicated to promoting the positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We are also available through live streaming video at ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-community.org. That would be the organization site. The TV site is www.atheist-experience.com. The Atheist Experience is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit organization, and you can provide feedback by commenting on the unofficial show blog, atheistexperience.blogspot.com, or email us at tv@atheist-community.org. Just realized how many web addresses I'm trying to cram into every intro. Be sure to check out our other regular show, The Nonprofits, an audio-only podcast that is also available through the ACA website and streams live every Saturday, currently starting at 10:30 a.m., but it seems to be all over the place these days. If you enjoyed the show today, please come join us for dinner afterwards, beginning at around 6 at El Arroyo on 1624 West 5th Street in Austin, Texas. Finally, if you've been procrastinating thinking about whether you're going to go to the Bat Cruise or not, it's next week. So you're running out of time. In fact, you won't even get another reminder before it happens because it is next Saturday at 6 p.m. So get on the ball with that.
If you're going to go.
Yeah. There's not going to be a show on Sunday next week, some kind of studio closure, I believe. And I'd actually like to throw out a mention that if there are any fans of the Atheist Experience in Orlando, Linnea and I are going to be honeymooning there in November, and we'd kind of like to set up, get together one night for drinks or something. So email tv@atheist-community.org or join my public figure page, Russell Glasser, on Facebook, just in case you're interested in that. Sorry for the personal thing, and that's it.
That's okay. There was a Godless Bitches link that showed up on the screen, but you didn't mention them.
Well, it's not on this screen.
Well,
so, Godless
what
Bitches
is
awesome, too. It is a feminist atheist podcast that has started up also at Dillahunty International Studios and often features the likes of Linnea, Beth, Tracy, and Jen. And all the shows that I've heard so far.
That is also awesome.
Yes, they've been quite good. They've had a couple of very interesting guests on, and so check that out. Godless Bitches. You can Google it. I'm going to add that to my regular thing. So do you want to vamp for a second?
Oh, gosh. Hi, everybody.
Sorry about that.
Russell's typing at the moment. This is one of those things that happens on a live call-in show.
All right.
Access,
I'll get my news story out. Hold on.
Sometimes the host has other things to do than run the show. And so the co-host, that's why it's important that I'm here.
All right, I'll tell you what, let's go straight to callers, okay? We can dig up news stories later.
You and I always used to fight over whether the TV show should be like warts and all, and I was always in favor of that.
Okay.
Because I think that's more fun.
All right. Jonathan in Arlington, Texas. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Jonathan.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I'm a theist caller.
Yay.
I've been a long time viewer of your show and actually enjoy it. You guys have helped me break through a lot of the religious, I would say, mentality, fundamentalist Christian mentality. So it's been a positive thing watching your show.
So you're not a fundamentalist?
No, I'm no longer. I mean, I used to be semi-fundamentalist, but I had questions and watching your show kind of brought me out of that.
Okay. All right, see, honestly, I just want to say that makes me happy. I'm cool with you still being a theist, but if we push you in our direction one step, then I think we're doing our job.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm open to come to that step. I want to try to maintain as intellectually honest as possible. But I seem to have one problem though.
Okay.
With
All right.
the whole atheism thing.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much based upon my assertion. I assert that God cannot be proven. I believe it's an improvable concept. To even talk about it seems to be futile, because when you baseline God, and I see a lot of times, Matt, and you guys seem to ask people, what God do you believe in? Explain your definition of God. And that seems to be chasing the red herrings, these anthropomorphized versions of God, derivatives of what God is. But my thing is, you guys are not our Christian or our Muslim or our Joe Schmo's definition of God. You guys are atheists. So if I'm taking the atheist position, I have to really honestly, intellectually, honestly baseline the definition of God. And when doing so,
May I?
Yeah, you're good at this.
Yeah, actually, you're absolutely right. And I use the term atheist not in a blanket sense, but when I'm talking about the kinds of gods that almost everybody is talking about when they say God. Okay. Now, in the case of like Julius Caesar, who was declared a god by the Roman Senate, I'm a theist, because I don't really doubt that Julius Caesar existed, that there was a guy who was called a god, and that those historical events happened, and that historical figure existed.
Okay.
But that's not a problem for my atheism, because 99.9% of the time, that is not what people are talking about. Likewise, if you've got some South Seas Islanders with a totem pole, and they say that totem pole is their god, I can go up and rap on it with my knuckles and know that it exists. I'll have some issues about their claims of its magical powers. But as far as its existence, I'm a theist on the subject of that God. So, yes, you're absolutely right. If you mean the word, if you apply the word atheist to yourself and you mean absolutely everything that might possibly be called a God you don't believe in, you're going to be in trouble.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I understand people there's some fringe, beliefs in God. I like to base on it. I can't get 100% accuracy, but when you look at the meaning of when people say God, for the most part, for what I've experienced, and I can't say for everybody, but I come down to really one thing, and it comes down to infinity, something that's beyond your knowledge, even if it's beyond your knowledge at that time. During the Greeks, like lightning might have been beyond their knowledge, so they labeled that, of the gods, it was beyond their understanding, but once they understood it, it was no longer God.
So are you saying that lightning used to be...
something to me which represents something that's infinity. And even if that infinity moves, even if that line moves, infinity will always exist. And to me, that really is what represents God. That infinite being that represents infinity. Now, and when I say being God, I say being because it could be a natural infinity, a natural regress. But when I say God, I say people, for the most part, would link God to a being that represents infinity.
So this God of yours might not be sentient, might not actually do anything. It might just be an abstract concept.
It may be, because when I say infinity...
So if it's that, like Jeff said, that's not something we really want to argue with. It's just like Julius Caesar. If you want to call Julius Caesar God, go ahead, and I believe in Julius Caesar, so I believe in God. So if I accept your abstract concept, then we can say I'm a theist, but then so what?
Julius Caesar is finite. That's a person at one point somebody could
different people apparently you're trying to introduce another definition of God that is not what everybody thinks.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
can I just
Hey,
say something?
yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
I don't feel, and I understand where you guys are coming from, but I don't feel like I'm introducing that. Throughout history in the Bible, I don't believe in the literacy of the Bible, but throughout ancient texts, the Bible included,
Yeah.
God has been declared as being omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing, all-existing. These are terms which represent infinity, all.
Right.
This is not just in the Bible. So when I say baseline God,
Yeah.
these are terms that I'm not just bringing to the table. This has been in existence for, as long as I can remember, as long as I can go back.
Okay, now Russell was brought up Julius Caesar again, and you said that's not what you mean, because what you're talking about infinity, by which, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, you mean God is the something out there that's beyond our knowledge.
And I say being because
And
when I say
you say being.
I
Okay.
say being because God, when I say being, which represents infinity, obviously infinity could be a natural regress. But when I say when I want a baseline God.
Okay, why do you think there's a being?
No,
Why do you think there's an infinite being?
I'm not even going to the point where I say I believe there's a being. I'm just saying the baseline God.
Yeah?
God baseline is a being which represents infinity.
And you don't believe in that?
Throughout it, no, I'm not making any statement of. I haven't even got to my statement of belief yet.
Okay.
I'm trying to get there.
But, well, I thought maybe I could say something that would give us a little common ground, okay? And that is, Russell and I do not doubt that there are things that are beyond our knowledge.
Okay.
Right?
We just don't call them God.
We don't call them God because if they're beyond our knowledge, you really can't say anything about them. That's the nature of being beyond our knowledge. It's a thing we don't know anything about. So why would you characterize it as a God?
So if that's the case, I don't care what we call it. We can call it boobalai, job. We can make up words. These are just letters.
A lot of people have made up those words.
Exactly the term. So God, we can just throw that off the table. Let's just call it. I call it God because this is a theism versus atheism debate.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that God baseline represents those properties, the infinite properties that I stated. Now you don't have to call it God here. You can call it whatever you want. But as far as this is concerned, I would like to keep the terminology the same.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not, that's just my starting point.
Okay.
I'm not saying that I believe that thing exists yet. I haven't even gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
But if that thing that we can't understand, which we don't want, the entity, let's not even call it God, that thing which we cannot understand yet, to me it's logical to believe that it is a being. And I say God because God is a being which represents infinity.
Why do you say it's logical to say it's a being?
Okay, I'm getting there. I say it's logical to believe that because if you ask anybody, do they want to live forever? Do they want eternal life? Do they hope for it? Most people would say yes. Now, God is inconceivable. We can't conceive it because infinity is inconceivable. If it was conceivable, it wouldn't be infinity. So it's inconceivable. So now it really stops at hope. Do you hope that there's a being? If there is a being, by its very nature, it could. I don't know if it would or, I can't even propose those things, but by its nature, if it's all-powerful, it could grant me eternal life because he exists in the eternal life. It could. I don't know if it would. So to me, it's natural to hope that God exists and that God is true. I don't know if it is. I can't even go there. I can't even conceive it. But it really stops at hope. So if I hope that God exists and I can't prove it, it's improvable, to me, belief is just a function of that hope. See, when it's something that's improvable, like,
Go ahead.
We've got like an hour show, and we're going to have to get to a point pretty quickly.
Okay.
So that's really my point. When you're talking about...
So you want me to say something?
So you hope that there's a God, and therefore you think it's logical to assume that what you hope is true.
But I wouldn't, when I say hope, a lot of people say, well, I hope many things. I hope that I become a millionaire. I hope I this and that.
Right.
I don't compare, I don't think that's an apple to apple.
So you agree that wanting something to be true doesn't make it true.
No,
so there need to be other reasons why it's probably true before you jump to the conclusion that it is.
And I want to make one more comment. I think you're equivocating. You said you call it natural to want this to be true, right? But then you jumped from there to saying it's logical. Things that it is natural for people to feel, that's not the same thing as it's logical to feel that way. Logic is separate from feelings.
Okay, let's separate it then.
Okay.
I think it's natural to hope for things that you want.
Okay.
And the reason why
I don't
break
think
it
you're
down-
gonna. I don't think you're gonna find an argument from us about that. But we're not
Right.
talking about what's natural. We're talking about what's true, right, and what's accurate.
But my statement is it can't be proven to be true or not to be true. It's one of those things that exist in an abyss.
So why would you say that?
And our response is, oh well, you know, we're still going to say that you can't say anything coherent at all about stuff you don't know anything about, including that it's a god. And all you're left with then is, well, it's natural for people to feel that way. And that may be the case, but just because it's natural doesn't make it accurate.
Accuracy is something we can't even ascertain this accuracy because we can't conceive it.
That may well be not our problem as atheists. It's not our problem.
But many times I feel like you said equivocate. I feel like you guys sometimes equivocate when you say, well, hope you're just hoping. You can't say hope can turn into belief. And you use an example, a finite example.
I didn't know. We didn't say that hope can't turn into belief. Obviously, it can. We said hope is not the same thing as logic.
Yeah, but I've heard in other conversations on the show where you say hope and belief are differences. You
No,
can't
I don't.
say
I'm
you
not
hope
aware of
something and
having
say, well,
said that.
They
hope,
are
therefore-
different, and one can turn into the other. There is no contradiction there.
Well, okay, it's not, to me, it's not logical to turn into the other. Because, for example, if you went out of town and it was a drought in Texas and you hoped that it rained, it wouldn't be logical for you to believe that it rained. Just because you hoped it rained, it's not logical to believe because you can do things to
I
test
mean,
it.
you should take that up with our governor.
Hello?
You should take that up with the Texas governor because he apparently has different ideas.
Oh,
about
well, yeah,
that.
I'm in total disagreement with him. But what I'm saying is it's not logical for hope to turn into belief when it's talking about something finite. You could test whether or not it rained. You could ask.
And it is logical if you're talking about something infinite. Why?
When you're talking about something infinite, because all you have is hope. It
So?
stops right
So?
there. So okay,
what?
So if I ask you, do you want to live forever? And you say, well, you know what? There's no way for me to know. It's inconceivable. I can't find out. Do you want to? Yeah, I want to. I hope.
So if I hope that I live 900,000 billion zillion years, a finite number of extra life, right?
Okay.
Then it doesn't make sense. Then it's not logical for me under any circumstances to conclude that I will. But if I hope that I'll live infinitely, then suddenly it is. It is logical to believe that I will.
As soon as you put a finite number on it, you can measure it. You can say, well, you want to live 1,000. Let's say 1,000 years.
But clearly, if I'm not going to live 900 billion zillion years, then I'm also not going to live eternally. If I can't show that I'm going to live 900 billion zillion years, then I know I'm not going to live eternally.
That's not necessarily true because even
Sure
science.
it is.
Right.
No, because
I think the problem
science,
here.
Even in science.
The
you have
problem
things like
here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but I'm trying to also get a point in.
Well,
I think that the problem here is that you're saying that if you try to demonstrate or prove God quantitatively, then that can't be done, which is true. We agree with you. But then you go on to the conclusion that, well, if I just avoid saying anything really that is capable of being examined, if I just change it to vague feeling type statements, then I'm justified in saying that because it can't be disproven. And you're right, it can't be disproven, but there's also no good reason to accept something vague on that, as you say, can't even be described. I mean, it's just trying to get away from being examined by saying things that are slippery enough that they don't bear rational discussion.
it has nothing to do with being examined because we just acknowledge that it can't be examined. That whole examination.
But that is the characteristic that you are invoking to justify the rest of your argument. You are saying because it can't be examined, therefore you're justified to leap to all these conclusions, Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan.
No, you're justified to hope.
All right.
I said it stopped at hope.
I'm done.
At hope.
Okay. I think we've gotten all the useful discussion we can out of
Thanks
this.
for your call, Jonathan.
Thanks. If you want to email us.
Maybe go back and watch this segment again. Maybe on further viewings you will notice relevant points that we made.
Right.
One can only hope.
Ryan in Portland. Hello?
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 Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Hi.
Ryan.
You know, I know Orion in Portland, and apparently it's not you, so I'm a little disappointed, but but not too much.
Okay. Two quick questions. First of all, I was curious if either of you have heard of or read the book The 6 Ways of Atheism by Jeffrey Berg.
No.
No.
Okay. It was a book I picked up about a year ago, but it's 6 logical disproofs for the existence of God, and it's actually a really fascinating read.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
Consider it plugged.
My question is, and I apologize because I know this, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure this question has come up on your show before. But I just got done watching a marathon of debates about the existence of God on YouTube, and this question, has come up on every single debate, and I really just want to get your opinion on it.
Okay.
It's the question of the supposed link between nihilistic, destructive atheism and the communist regimes of the 20th century. I mean, when you hear that, come up in a discussion, what is your take on that?
I think
when someone says, the reason these regimes were so destructive, was because they didn't believe in God, and I'm just curious as to what, I know this has come up,
Yeah,
I know for
I
you
think,
guys before,
can I
I'm
answer?
sure, and I'm just curious what
Right.
your insight is on it.
I think that they are latching on to the best example they could find of atheists behaving badly, even though when you bring up counterexamples of Christians behaving badly, they're quick to dismiss them as not true Christians. So if you mention that that Hitler had apparently very strong ties to the Catholic Church, if you bring up the strong anti-Semitism of Martin Luther, if you talk about the Crusades, then they will immediately dissociate themselves from any bad behavior because they'll say those aren't true Christians. While at the same time hoping that any atheists that they can give examples of behaving badly will reflect on atheism as a whole. I mean, that's an obvious fallacy. It's true that that these regimes were, these were basically atheist and actually enforced non-beliefs, but that doesn't mean that atheists are generally sympathetic to communism. I'm not.
Communism.
Not just communism, but Stalinism or Maoism.
Or mass murder, right?
Right,
Let's get to the meat of the subject, right?
Mass murder.
There is nothing in atheism which says, because there is no God, it is okay or commanded or there's any other encouragement to go out and kill a bunch of people, whereas those kinds of encouragements can easily be found in all the major world religions.
Okay. Well, that was it then. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for your call, Ryan.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Jason in Lubbock, Texas.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, you live in Lubbock?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I know. Russell, I was waiting for you to be on because I was like, oh man, I have to call when Russell's there because I definitely have something to say about Lubbock.
Okay.
But yeah, I am. I'm actually probably one of the only 2 atheists. I actually saw a guy with a Darwin sticker the other day. So
You might be surprised. I mean, there's no way of knowing.
There's a secular society at Tech, but I'm sure it's not very big. But anyway. The reason I was calling, I got a mailer the other day from Experience Life Now Church, and I emailed it to Frank, and we had a little back and forth discussion on it. But it's basically a mailer they sent trying to invite people to their church, and one of their new sermons was it was titled Christian Atheist. And it had a picture of this guy, half his face is blue, half his face is red, and the red side, of course, it says atheist, and the blue is Christian. But they started talking about how people were Christians and believed in God, but lived like he didn't exist. And to me, it was kind of an insult, saying you don't have any morals. You do whatever you want whenever you want because you're living like an atheist. Just wanted to see what you guys thought about that.
I say, hooray! Come the rest of the way and drop the Christianity part.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, of course, the Christians only think they can get away with saying, oh, atheists just want to do whatever they feel like, because they have asserted that proper rules of behavior come from their religion, and so if you are not a member of their religion, you are automatically wanting to do things that violate the proper rules of behavior. In fact, as an atheist, I do what I want, and what I want conforms to my standards of good behavior. And really, the places where my standards of good behavior differ from Christianity are, things like, hating people because they are of other religions, putting witches to death, other various nonsense that you can find in the Bible. That's the part that where my behavior actually differs from theirs. Now, from their perspective, that makes me a bad guy, but I don't care.
Yeah. And it doesn't even make sense if you read what they wrote. I mean, Christian atheists is like.
I know.
I thought my head was going to explode when I read it.
We have covered on the show before. We have covered stories about people that go to church but don't actually believe because they're just going along to get along. And even was it Dan Dennett that did the study on pastors and ministers and priests who don't believe but are in the business?
I think that's right.
Right.
So people like that do exist.
Right.
I mean, I often surprise people by claiming to be a Jewish atheist. So so I can see people being raised Christian but not taking the God part all that seriously. And while I would think that they'd want to drop a lot more of the trappings of Christianity, I wouldn't say that it's head explode territory.
Yeah. Well, I had to read it like 3 times because like, there's no way this is what this says.
Don't forget that the word atheist, as I've heard, was originally coined to describe Christians who were denying the Roman gods.
Right.
So, like Jeff was saying earlier, you can only declare yourself an atheist with respect to a particular god.
Right. All those Christians are atheists with respect to all gods other than Jehovah.
Right,
True.
and Thomas Jefferson, a good example, like rewrote the Bible with all the miraculous stuff stripped out, but also said, I'm still a Christian because I follow the nice stuff that Christ said. Now, I mean, I don't think I'd agree with him on that point, but I can see where he's coming from anyway.
Yeah, I actually bought Thomas Jefferson's Bible for my brother. He's a Christian, and I bought it for him. Wow, a commercial just came on my feed on my computer.
Well, don't watch the feed right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to get away from it. But anyway, and I also wanted to tell you a couple more things about Lubbock that I'm sure you'd love to hear, Russell.
If you want, you got to make it pretty quick, though.
Yeah, just a second. I actually heard on the radio they were having a evangelical revival, and there was some guy saying that they had people down there growing their legs because one of their legs was shorter than the other one, and they're still doing that stuff.
They really should apply for the $1 Million Challenge from James Randi, because that would be pretty impressive.
Well, I wanted to go down there and try it and just not let them take my shoes off. When they slide your shoes back and forth.
All right. That it?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.
What are you doing there, if I may ask?
I actually go to tech.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
you almost done?
Yeah, I'm about to start working on my master's in history.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for calling, Jason.
Bye. We got Frank in Louisville, Kentucky. Frank?
Hello, Frank.
Hello?
Frank.
Hi.
Yes.
Yes, is this the Atheist Experience?
This is the Atheist Experience.
Okay. I actually just wanted to ask, is Matt hosting today?
No.
Okay.
I'm Russell, and he's Jeff.
Hi.
Okay.
But, I mean,
well,
you can
I
ask
guess I
us,
can-
too. We usually agree with him.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I've heard a number of times on the show that people will call in, and they'll get to a point in a discussion where Matt will usually say something along the lines of, well, I care if my beliefs are true. And not once have I ever heard somebody shoot back with, oh, I do care. Which kind of reminds me of when I was going through my own exploration from Catholic to Christian to atheist that
You know, Catholics
I
are
was talking to
Christians, too.
I was talking to my brother, and I told him the same thing because he was kind of questioning me, and I said, I just don't want to believe anything that isn't true. And I wanted to get you guys' comments on that.
On the fact that nobody retorts, yes, I do want to believe only true things.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that necessarily is indicative of some deep problem. I think most people. My guess is most of the people that hear that are just taken aback because, like, how dare they be accused of not caring whether the things they believe are true or not. I think most people do care. I just think most people have no idea how to go about improving their odds.
Right.
You know, this actually very much ties into a study that was being talked about in the news this week. It was done by, let's see, it was research published by the American Psychological Association. And it mentions that in the first part of the study, 882 adults with a mean age of 33, blah, 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 completed online surveys about their belief in God before taking a cognitive reflection test. The test had 3 math problems with incorrect answers that seemed to be intuitive. For example, one question stated, a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? The intuitive answer is 10 cents, but the correct answer is 5 cents. And participants who had more incorrect answers showed a greater reliance on intuition than reflection in their thinking style. So in other words, what this study was saying was that God belief is positively correlated with the quality of tending to jump to the first answer that sounds good instead of stopping to think about it and come up with the right answer. I mean, that just seemed kind of similar to what you're pointing out here.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you bring up.
Yeah, I do think, again, if confronted, I think most of those people would say, after they got over their huff, they would say, well, yes, of course I care whether my answers are correct or not. They just don't know how to go about doing it.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really like pinning down a methodology for figuring out whether something's true or not.
Or they don't, or they simply don't have one and think that the way they go about doing things is fine.
Right. Like it doesn't matter if it's rigorous or not.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting that believers are so quick to persecute or point fingers at people that don't believe, and yet most don't ever stop to really question their own faith and do I really believe this for a good reason?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny. I mean, we get a lot of we've had a lot of encounters on this show and elsewhere with Christians who seem to seek out atheists solely for the purpose of engaging in a dialogue with us so that they can dig in their heels and go away patting themselves on the back for how their encounter with an atheist, they did not allow that to make them to change their minds, right?
Right.
And from their perspective, why, that is questioning, that is testing, right? Because what they're testing is not the accuracy of their beliefs. What they're testing is the strength of their faith. Because
Yeah,
I think
well,
that's the
you're
important
wrong.
thing.
Quite often, I'll come to a point in a conversation where I realize, this guy is just saying the same thing over and over again, and he's not really responding to anything I ask him. And I say, hey, would you answer these questions? And he'll say, those are stupid questions. At that point, I have to tell people usually, I don't appreciate being used as a dartboard for your ideas when you're not listening to any response. And I'm not really obligated to talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anything else?
That it?
Yeah. Yeah, a quick other question. Something I've thought of, and it's come up. I've seen it a number of times on the show. I've been watching for about a year, and you guys do a wonderful job, by the way. I just want to let
Thanks
you
very
guys know.
much.
Thank you.
The topic of moral absolutes. I mean, do you think that in every situation something is either absolutely right, absolutely wrong, or can there be some sort of middle ground where it depends?
I think there's not only a middle ground where it depends. I think there's also such a thing as tragedies, where moral conundrums, where there is the various possible answers are all equally distasteful.
Right.
These things happen because reality is complex.
Yeah, I think there's no way that you can encapsulate morality with really simple, trivializing platitudes like, don't kill because, self-defense. But there is a way to sort of look at a situation and then compare what values are at play. And values, of course, depend on somebody having the values, so they are kind of subjective in a way. But once people have settled on what their values are, then you can go about rationally deciding which course of action best supports those values. And Christians who pretend that they're not doing the same thing are just kidding themselves, because they're all when Matt and I talked to Ray Comfort a few months ago, Ray Comfort was willing to say that he didn't agree with some stuff that was in the Bible. And so really, it's a question of what the person you're talking to values, because we don't actually get our morality from religion. We simply use a filter of our own values to declare that religious morality is supposedly good, or the best way of coming to conclusions.
Right. I think the world would be a pretty scary place if we actually lived by the morality of the Bible.
Oh yeah, look up dominionism sometime. Those guys take it seriously.
Yeah, people like Fred Phelps.
Yeah. So thanks for your call. I think
Yeah.
we're going to move on.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks a lot. You guys are doing a great job.
Thanks. And
Thank
you
Yeah,
were
bye.
a great caller.
Best
Let's see.
so far. He gets the caller medal of the day.
Yeah. So just want to remind people that, as always, we're going to be meeting at El Arroyo right after the show, and it's always a good time, so come on down to 5th Street.
If you want to.
If you want to. So looks like we've got full lines, but we only have one guy left who's actually screened, so if the control room is being aggressive on trying to get Christians in, lighten up a little for at least one call. Joe in Seattle.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Hey, you guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
Hey, I called in before. I was so excited to get a hold of you guys that I kind of talked my way off the phone a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yes?
Mostly.
Okay.
A
Hey, I
little
was going to
quiet.
say something on this morality thing that you guys are talking about. Isn't it true? I mean, even if you took the Bible as being the true Word of God, let's just suppose the Bible is true, isn't it God who actually tried to keep us from the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden?
Yeah.
So we would actually have to say that if the serpent came down and told Eve that go ahead and eat off the tree, that they're lying to you, that all it's going to do is make you be like the God, then it was a secular decision against God's will or his command that actually gives us this knowledge of right and wrong. Isn't that correct? I mean, if the Bible was true, we know it's not, but just suppose it was true.
Sure.
Isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and so I was always listening to these Christians say that God gives us our morals, but the knowledge of good and evil was actually God let you try to
I see where you're going.
I think there's a. But I hate being put in the position of defending these fairy tales, but I think the intent of that little fable is that God did not want Adam and Eve to have direct personal, immediate, inherent grasp of good and evil. What he wanted was for them to obey him. Obviously, he wanted them to think that good consists of doing what he says, and evil consists of violating his commands. That would still be in place even if that's all they knew. But that's just obedience. That's not actual understanding of morality. And interestingly, that's how I would characterize Christianity today, right? I mean, it's their idea of morality is obey the rules in the Bible, more or less, right? Or at least your personal interpretation of them. But ultimately, good is what God says is good, and bad is what God says is bad, and really it's about obeying.
Wow, okay. So, because I always ask my Christian friends, the ones who were saved at a later age, like 30 or 40, I said, so what you're telling me is you were robbing, killing, and raping, and doing all this bad before you got saved? You know what I mean? You realize that you were doing all this bad stuff right up until you got saved, and then you realize morality.
Some of them would possibly say yes.
Yeah, we have had at least one caller who said yeah.
Yeah.
That if he stopped believing, he would be right out on the street.
Yeah, but I think he's asking if theists would actually say that they already did bad stuff. And there's all these conversion testimonies that you hear all the time about how they were druggies and reached rock bottom and everything was terrible until they found God. And I always feel like, how come none of that stuff ever happened to me? I guess I'm just luckier than you.
And I wanted to ask another question too. I asked my Christian friend the other day about hell and why would God create hell, and he said created it for the devil and his angels, not for us. Well, why didn't God send somebody down to die on the cross for his angels' sin? Aren't they a little bit more important than us? You didn't give them the same loophole? You know what I mean?
Interesting question, but again, it's not our job to try to make sense of these fables.
Yeah, you really ought to take this up with Christians, because you're just asking us to be the proxy Christian and defend this stuff, and that's not really what we're here for.
We can make shit up just as easily as they can.
Okay. Well, I always wanted to ask them questions, and hopefully they can hear a couple of these questions while they're listening to your show, because it's always amazing.
Seriously, why don't you find some? Go look for people who you can talk to that believe this stuff.
I don't want to make up plausible sounding answers to these questions and then have Christians watching our show getting their answers from me. It's really not my job.
Okay, well, man, I'm sorry, guys. I always like to ask good questions. I mean, it's amazing how they want to leave this first creation of God to go to this next one. You kind of want to look at the first one, see how bad of a job he really did before you decide you want to go to the next one.
Yeah.
All right.
But anyway, I just wanted to get that out there if anybody's listening. So,
thanks for calling.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye. We do get a lot of emails like that asking us to explain what Christians think about so-and-so. And I always wonder, if they're maybe a little bit afraid to talk to Christians directly, so they're using us as sort of a proxy shield of some sort, but I don't know.
Yeah, it slightly troubles me how atheism has become like this hobby of arguing with Christians.
Yeah,
where, really, I'd rather that only the people who already had a pretty clear idea what they were talking about did the arguing, because best way to cement a believer's faith is for them to encounter an atheist that can't hold up their end of the argument.
Yeah, but I think that the purpose of arguing is not necessarily to shake the believer's faith, but to try to get practice and understand what you think. And
that's true.
And so
it's useful in that regard.
Yeah. So, I mean, I encourage people to talk to their Christian friends just on that basis, because you can't really know what you think unless you know how to deal with the responses to what you're saying yourself.
Yeah. I just urge, caution.
Right. Joseph in, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, New York.
Hey, how are you guys doing? Am I on the line?
Yeah.
Schenectady?
Skinny Atlas.
Really? All right.
Yeah, hey, how are you guys
Skinny
doing?
Atlas.
Hey, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I used to be an atheist. I used to be a materialist. I was involved in the occult. I've seen supernatural miracles. I spent thousands of hours in prayer. I've had experiences where people, I've prayed asking people what my name should, if I should change my name from J to Joseph, and a few days later, I had somebody walk up to me and prophesy over me, your name is Joseph. And I wanted
Joseph,
to bring
are
up
you
the
a professional
issue
public
of,
speaker of some
I put that in
sort?
context.
Joseph,
I'm a Christian.
Joseph,
yeah.
Are you a professional public speaker of some sort?
No.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah, basically, I studied philosophy in college. I've looked at the history of philosophy. I look at when, the development of philosophy and logical systems. When you look at, for instance, Zeno of Elea. Are you guys familiar with Zeno?
Yeah, I know Zeno. He had a lot of mistaken ideas about math, but still pretty
exactly.
cool.
And I believe that, there's a certain amount of hubris in asserting universal statements such as God does not exist, and also making universal statements about morality that are essentially, even if you're asserting, a very, very rigorous standard. No one could actually prove how objects moved for hundreds of years, but that didn't stop scientists from, up until Isaac Newton, who was a man of God. Nobody's actually able to prove until the existence of limits with calculus. And what I'm saying is, practically in epistemology, you don't always need to prove everything. Like the experiences that I've had are real enough that, and I've actually done that myself. I've prophesied to people that I didn't know their name, and I felt that the Spirit of God gave me their name or words of knowledge. And I relate to God, what Alvin Plantinga calls properly basic.
Joseph, can I just cut in on you for a second? I mean,
sure.
You are on the phone with us. You have issued a series of claims and assertions, and you have just put yourself on the record as a guy who does not believe that you have any responsibility to show that any of the claims or assertions you've made are actually true or accurate. So we have nothing to say to you. What do we have to talk about? You're going to claim whatever you want, and if we try to corner you to get you to show that anything that you're saying is something we should pay attention to, you're going to say, well, I don't think I have to. We're done. I think you should hang up on this guy.
Okay. I was going to ask him to name the person sitting in the front row of our studio audience right now, but that's okay.
Well, that would be a test, and he doesn't do tests.
Oh, that's right. Proofs. Yeah, that's not good. Nick in Denver.
Hey, you guys sound a little quiet, but I'll just say what I'm going to say.
Just listen to the phone and not the, not the stream.
You guys were talking about kind of the what some Christians might call objective morality. To me, this is I'm an atheist, by the way. This is a theological point I always try to get them to talk about, because either they think that God dictates morality directly, or they think that in his omniscience, he knows what's true. I think this is a really important point, because if you think that God dictates morality, and if people believe the God that they choose to believe in, well, then really it's just hubris. Because all they're doing is asserting the God that they believe in is dictating all these things. There's no real reasoning behind it. So I always look at it, if God is omniscient, this is the question I pose to them, if God really is omniscient, then it should still fit within the scope of reasoning, to where you can determine what's more or not through that same scope.
Okay.
So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that. Do you think that's a valid criticism, to where if they do think God is omniscient, well then shouldn't we also, with our minds, be able to determine certain levels of moral truth? And if they don't match up with that, then doesn't that mean that their belief in God is wrong?
You know what the Euthyphro dilemma is, right? Or have you heard of
what?
that? The Euthyphro dilemma.
I do not know.
Oh, that's
You're
that's
very,
pretty cool.
very, very close to touching on it with what you're saying, Nick.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Russell.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I credit Jeff for coming up with this as a talking point in a lot of morality discussions a number of years ago. But this is one of the dialogues by Plato about Socrates, where this guy came in saying that he knew what's right and wrong because he does what's beloved by the gods. And Socrates said, I hope I get this right, are things that are right beloved by the gods because they're right, or are they right because they're beloved by the gods? And both of the possible responses are problematic, because if you say that whatever God says is automatically right because he said it, then that means that God could basically say whatever he wants. He could say that raping babies is the highest moral good in the universe.
And it would suddenly become that because he said so.
And most Christians wouldn't say that, although they do accept stories like the one where Abraham was asked to kill his son, and he was like, all right, I'm going for it. And then God said, just kidding, so he didn't have to. But that's often held up as something that is morally right, to be willing to jump in and say, yeah, sure, I'll kill my son, you told me to. But I don't think many Christians would be comfortable with saying that if they heard voices in their head telling them to kill their son.
Or with the idea that morality was just some set of rules that the God made up.
Exactly.
That it has nothing to do with consequences, it has nothing to do with practical advantages of behaving certain ways, that it's just a set of rules that God made up off the top of his head, and they could have been anything, but they just happen to be these ones, and that's why you have to follow them. That's a problem.
Right. On the other hand, if you say that God only tells you things that are right, that are objectively right, then God is kind of an irrelevant middleman in that situation, because he might as well not even be there. If it's possible to conclude what's right and wrong through pure reasoning, and God is just telling us this is what I've figured out is right and wrong, then you could, in principle, cut God out of the picture, and he's not relevant to deciding what's right and wrong.
And figure it out for yourself.
Well, not only that, then the issue becomes, then reason becomes more important than faith.
Right.
Because that's the method that God would use as well.
Right.
And it ought to be.
Now, Christian apologists are aware of the Euthyphro dilemma, and they have a response. And it's important when you learn about if you're an atheist and you learn about the Euthyphro dilemma, you should be prepared for this response. Their response is, well, no, God doesn't just make up morality. Morality springs from God's nature. Okay? So they're making it not arbitrary. They're trying to make morality not arbitrary by saying, yeah, it is what God says, but God has to say that because that is who God is. It is the way he is, right?
But you could say that still falls under the definition of being arbitrary. Cause
it is, but what you have to say is, okay, where did God get his nature from? He either made it up himself, in which case he dictated morality when he determined what his own nature was going to be, or some other mysterious prior cause resulted in God having the nature that he has, and then, again, that cuts God out of the picture. But so that's how they try to get around it. They try to move it back one step, hoping that The Christians try to move it back one step, hoping that the person they're talking to won't think to question where the God got the nature from.
Right.
Well, they do the same with
by the way,
cosmological argument from design as well, where they set the argument back to God created everything.
Sure. Yeah,
That's
it's very similar
tactic.
actually. And if you'd like to look that up, the spelling is EUTHYPHRO. It's a Greek thing. Thanks for calling.
Thanks.
We have about, I'd say, 3 minutes left. So who's next? Who's next? We already talked to you. Ian? I think Ian in Rockford.
Oh, hey guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi. Yes, I basically wanted to let you know, I had a conversation with a friend the other day about the reason for evil, pain, and how it exists outside the realm of the creature we would call God. And he was trying to explain to me that there is no need for me to question that God has to have pain and suffering in the world, because we would not know what pleasure and happiness is without the contrast.
Okay, so if I go around punching somebody in the face, they should thank me, because I'm just showing them what good is, by contrast of not being punched in the face most of the time.
I believe that's a beautiful response to that.
And not, actually, you could limit it to just the spank on the bottom from the doctor when you're born. Bang! You have experienced pain. You're done. You've got your contrast.
Right.
It doesn't. That argument that your friend gave you doesn't justify why it just keeps going on and on. But anyway,
and,
go on.
Well, the way that I came back with that, honestly, when it comes down to it, I didn't quite go that route, but I did go the route of the orgasm.
Yeah.
And now this might seem a little bit weird and strange and off the cuff, but if you don't feel any pain in your entire life, but you start out with the concept of an orgasm, that's a human experience that everybody's felt, for the most part, I hope. It's a rising level of pleasure that you can start from zero and go to pleasurable on the scale of here's pain at -10 and here's pleasure at +10, right?
Yeah.
So in imagining a universe where there is no pleasure or is no pain and no contrast to pleasure, would it make sense for a loving God to just invent the ever-rising, forever infinite orgasm?
I wouldn't even have to make it infinitely rising. I think your argument has well established that if you just had a baseline of neither pain nor pleasure, and then there were instances of pleasure but not of pain, you would still be able to tell the difference by comparing the pleasure with the neutral level.
Right.
That's a damn good point. I like it.
I mean, you know, sometimes I'm having an orgasm and sometimes I'm not. I'd sure like
now.
Not at the moment, but you know, bam, there's evolutionary psychology for you.
Yep. No. Thanks, guys. That's all I really needed to touch on.
Okay.
All right.
I mean, it was a good caller, but not that good.
You're gonna try to get one more in?
No, I'm out of time. I'm sorry. Igor, or perhaps Igor, depending on what we got. We're going to have to take you on the air like after the show, and we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks, everyone, for watching. See you at El Arroyo. Come to the Bat Cruise if you wanna. There's our great crew. We love you guys.
Thanks, crew.
And see you next week. No, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. No show next week.